Hey boys and girls, today we're going to learn about the brain, the spinal cord, and what happens when one of those get injured. So before we get started, I'm going to go over with you what a stimulus and a response is, because your brain uses stimuli from your surroundings and then it also generates a response for your reaction. So the first thing, a stimulus is a change in the environment. A response is a reaction to that. So I want you to think of like a cause and effect situation. So for example, a stimulus would be the hot temperature from, let's say, a handle from this fire in this pot here. When you go to touch that, that's the stimulus that gets sent up through your arm to your brain. And then your response would be to move your hand away. So what happens here with your response is always your reaction. Other living things also respond to their environment. So if you think about plants, they always move towards the light stimulus that they have. So light shines onto them and then they move towards them. And also with us, when we hear a bell ringing, you guys know to pack up and to move to your next class. That's your response. So stimulus always comes into your brain from one of your five senses. And then when it goes into your brain, there's a certain section of the brain that, generates that response. So for example, right here at the top of your brain, that's where your sense of smell comes to. For instance, let's say you do smell something that reminds you of your grandmother cooking or something, that would go up to the front part of your brain. Your vision goes to the back of your brain. And your hearing goes to the side of your brain, which makes sense because that's where your ears are located. So this is a picture of our brain, and you can see that different parts of the brain control different things. So deep in your brain, right here in the middle, that controls your memory and your learning ability. We also have our speech and language from the side of our brain. We also have our language here. All right, so this large part here that you see, this is the part of the brain called the cerebrum. This part right here is called the cerebellum. It's like our tiny brain. And then we have something called the brain stem, which connects the brain to the spinal cord. Your cerebrum is the largest region of the brain. It's what you think of when you think of like a picture of the brain, like what I just showed you. It controls functions like movement, your senses, your speech, thoughts, learning, memory, and even your personality. The cerebrum is divided into a left side and a right side. And what's really cool is the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, so it switches. And the way that we know this is people that have had strokes before. You can see when somebody gets a stroke where the damage is from an MRI. So let's say if the left side gets damage in the brain, then the right side of their body might go paralyzed. So right now, if you pick up your right hand and wave it, your left side of the brain is doing that. The cerebellum controls your muscle coordination and your balance. So muscle coordination is like how well you can, like for instance, how well you can participate in a sport, how well you walk. Like if I tell you to walk on a straight line, how well you are able to do that. That's your coordination. Number 3 is your brain stem. So this is what connects your brain to your spinal cord. Your brain stem controls things like your heart and your lungs, so mainly your involuntary actions. It is possible for people to be alive with just their brain stem and these other parts of the brain go dead, and that's what being brain dead is. That person can stay alive because their heart's still beating and they're still breathing, but they just don't have conscious awareness, or they can't really do anything else than just lay there. Now, I'm going to go back here I'm going to show you this picture. The reason why we know that your brain controls your personality is because back in the day, mentally ill patients used to get something called a lobotomy. That's where they would drill into the skull, take a little toothpick, and peel out part of the brain and then seal it back up, and then have that person rest. Well, after that, their personality would just completely change. And we don't do lobotomies anymore. But what we know of the brain is because of things that have happened to people that damage parts of the brain. Also, a lot of the brain and what we know is still kind of a mystery. It's just so hard to study the brain because the brain needs to be inside the person and the brain needs to be alive. But you can't really see what's going on because it's in their skull. So it just makes it so hard to study it. All right. So what you see here, this is the different lobes of the brain. We have the frontal lobe. We have the parietal lobe, occipital lobe, which controls your vision, and the temporal lobe. So those are the 4 lobes of the brain. And here's a picture of the brain and how it looks. When your brain is inside of your skull, it actually has more of a pinkish look to it because of the blood. So this one, the blood has been washed off of it. This is the cerebrum. That's the cerebellum that you see. And down here is the brainstem. That kind of white stuff that looks like a spider web, that is the connective tissue that kind of holds the pieces of the brain together. Now, I mentioned before that your brain is divided into a left side and a right side. So for many years, we thought that the left side of the brain has control over your mathematical and more of like your science and your logical thinking. And your right side is more of like your creative side. You're more artistic. You might be more musical on the right side. So people tend to kind of lean to more than one of these. In the science notebook for this week, there's a test to figure out which one you are. And it is possible to use both sides of your brain. So it's not like you just use just one side. You actually do use both sides, but you might be more reliant on one side than the other. Like for me, I'm probably more of a creative, artistic than I am mathematical person. All right, now for the next one is the spinal cord. The spinal cord is protected by your vertebrae, which is your backbone. Your spinal cord does run through your backbone, like you can see here in this picture. Your spinal cord, if it gets pinched by that bone, it can cause back pain. So anytime you're feeling any kind of pain in your back, that's because of your spinal cord is usually getting pinched by that bone, and that's what a pinched nerve is. Sometimes people can get something called a slip disc or a herniated disc, and that's due to the cartilage right here. That cartilage slips out and then the nerve gets pinched by the bone. It kind of gets wedged in there. The only thing that really fixes that is surgery and just like therapeutic like exercises. But it's something that can be very painful for people. So you can see here the spinal cord. It does run all the way down. And the spinal cord is just a bundle of nerves that goes throughout the body, and it links your body with your brain. Now, with the spinal cord, your spinal cord is responsible for your quick reflexes. So, for example, let's say you do touch something that's really hot, and it burns you. Your body and like your hand will move away from that hot source very quickly. So, and the reason for that is because the stimulus is communicating just with your spinal cord first, and then it sends a signal from your spinal cord down back to your arm to help you to move it away. The reason why these are so quick is because the signal doesn't have to travel all the way up to the brain. It just travels to your spinal cord. Reflexes, we have these to help protect us because we can respond very quickly. And actually, we respond quicker than it takes for the pain to set in. And that's a good thing because, again, it gets you out of harm's way before you get really hurt. Like if you just waited for your brain to notice that you were burning, you'll probably get a 2nd or 3rd degree burn here. So these are automatic. They happen without your conscious awareness because it's just your spinal cord, and they're very quick. All right, now the last thing we're going to go over is the injuries of the nervous system. So we can injure our brain, and the most common injury is a concussion. So let's say you are playing a sport, let's say football, and you hit your head or you fall down on the ground. Well, that concussion is a bruise, and that bruise comes from your head and your brain making impact with either the ground and with your skull. What happens is your brain collides with the skull or with the ground or an object. It might be another person. And it causes that bruise, which is just bleeding on the brain. It does have side effects, like for some people when they get a concussion, they might black out. That doesn't always happen though. You can also get a headache. You can get like very confused, like you don't know what's going on. And some people afterwards, they might get really drowsy. But the main thing is the headache that they feel. So that's why we do recommend that you use helmets to, especially in football with so much impact, why you use a helmet to protect your head, because it does give you a little extra cushion to help protect your brain from getting injured. You want to protect your brain because you only have one brain, so you don't want anything to get damaged with it. Multiple concussions can lead to a major brain damage called CTE or traumatic brain injury. CTE can have lasting effects. It usually doesn't start to affect people until they're in their 30s or 40s. For instance, Antonio Brown, he's a current football player that we think that might have CTE. And the reason why we think that is because he took a major hit to the head, and this impact when he took this fall was just drastic. And it was within a few months after that, he started to act very differently. With CTE, it changes your personality. It makes you more aggressive and more impulsive. So we think that maybe that drastic hit that he took may have changed and damaged his brain. Again, we don't know that for sure because you can't go inside their brain and see. You can only really tell if CTEs happened to somebody after they died. Any football players that have donated their brain to CTE research, I think about 90% of them have had CTE. So it's definitely something that's very real. All right, the last thing is spinal cord injury. So whenever you do get in a major car accident and it gets really bad where it breaks your back, that breaking your spinal cord can make it where you go paralyzed because it cuts off the communication to the brain. And people that get paralyzed, that just completely changes their lifestyle. They might have to be more reliant on other people. It might be hard for them to get around. If you're paralyzed, you use your ability to move. For instance, if you get a break in your neck, it paralyzes you from the neck down and you can't move your arms and legs. The reason why I mention that is because there was a famous actor. His name was Christopher Reeves, and he was the first original actor to play Superman. And he was actually riding a horse, and he fell off the horse and broke his neck. Well, with that injury, it made it where he was paralyzed from the neck down, and for the rest of his life, he couldn't move. So paralysis, again, is where you lose the ability to move, and it comes from breaking part of the spinal cord. All right, guys, that's it for this presentation. If you have any questions about concussions or injuries like paralysis, please let me know those and comment below. All right, have a good day.